This is Ralph Brandt from the Fireside. I want to throw out a little bit of history here. By the way, one of the few branded pieces of anything that I have, whoops, I'm trying to figure out how to get it in the camera, is a coffee mug from the History Guy. And he's a neat guy. Little history on the History Guy. He was a high school teacher who was laid off, and he had this YouTube channel that he was starting, and it was going pretty well. And he just never went back to teaching. Well, actually, he did. He's teaching a larger classroom right now. And if you get a chance, go out and pick him up. Look at a couple of his videos, and if you like him, stay with him. He's one of about 8 or 9 video channels that I spend time with. One of the others is Lato's Law. Another one is What's Going On with Shipping. Another is, those two kind of will, the titles will tell you what they are. Another one is called Blancolirio. That's Juan Brown, who is a pilot who does reviews on aircraft accidents. Good ones, not the glitzy ones that get done. Those are the primaries. There's also a ship's chief engineer, and I can't think of his name right now, that I've watched a few of. These are guys that in their field are good and try to stay in their own lane. The History Guy is very much general history, and he's great. He does good research. I actually sometimes check him and find out that he's right. But what I wanted to talk about, part of my study of World War II, I got into something called the DDs. They're referred to also as tin cans. The official is destroyer, or the smaller one, the destroyer escort. The destroyers had a maximum size of 5-inch guns, I think around 10 torpedoes. The DEs had 3-inch guns, most of them, and 3 torpedoes. Several of these destroyers made massive differences in the war. The destroyer England, near the end of the war, sunk 6 Japanese submarines in, I think it was 12 days. The last one, the group of DEs that she was with, by the way, she was a DE, told her to stand back. They were going to sink this Jap sub. This was her number 6. And when they failed to get it, after a while, one of the captains radioed, "Go ahead, England." And shortly thereafter, there were bubbles and oil slicks coming from the deep. Scratch another Japanese submarine. Another one that I love is the destroyer Laffe. The Laffe was a sacrificial lamb. It was a destroyer, that's a full-size destroyer, that was put out as a radar picket north of the main fleet to spot Japanese kamikazes coming in and warn the fleet so that they could get aircraft up to defend the fleet. In a running battle, the Laffe was hit by multiple kamikazes. Her captain was killed. She was a beat-up wreck. She was still afloat and fighting. My understanding is she is a memorial at the Naval Yard in Charleston, I believe. One of these days I'm going down there. I want to see her. A couple of other ones, and I'll forget one of the names, but one of them was the Johnston. In the Battle of Leyte Gulf, they were part of a force called Taffy 3. It was a group of escort carriers. These were small carriers, usually built on cruiser hulls. And these carriers were being defended by these couple of destroyers. I think there were 3. And one of the largest Japanese battleships, supported by several cruisers, slipped through and would have wiped out Taffy 3 and then gone on and been able to wipe out the ships supplying the troops in the Leyte Gulf, that's Philippines, by the way, landing. The Johnston and the other one, and I'll see if I can find the name and stick it on the screen, made brash attacks running straight at the Japanese force. They were able to, I believe, sink one of the cruisers, damage another, damage the battleship some, that the Japanese thought they were against a superior force and withdrew. By the way, the planes off of the carriers, one of which was sunk, also attacked that force, mostly with land bombs, that because they were supporting the landing, not a naval support force. The Japanese reported that they had encountered a fleet with several cruisers, which are much larger than destroyers. And somehow these little guys with guts and brash turned a much superior Japanese force. This is why I study history. It isn't the ships, although the ships are part of it. It isn't the planes. It's the men like the captain of those 2 destroyers. It's the men who manned the submarines, the men who flew those missions. They're the ones that are the heroes. It's the men like the cooks that stood a line at Bastogne, 100 yards long. Shouldn't have been there, but they were. And with the help of about a half a dozen paratroopers, they held a 100-yard line against the best the Germans had, and there were bodies stacked up in front of them. They didn't break and run. They had no training for what they were doing. It was training on the job. And in many cases, this is the kind of people that stood between defeat and victory. I respect every one of them. I'll tell you a little story about another one. This is one of my uncles. His name was Robert Heller. He was one of the ones that was there in the early part of the war. He was in North Africa. Purple Heart for injuries when an aircraft engine fell on him. Oh, by the way, he was in a safe position. He was an aircraft mechanic. Wrong. North Africa, the airports were front lines. Well, not front lines in the sense of ground troops, but front lines in the sense of attacks. He later served as a trainer in the South, I think Louisiana, and then was moved back to the European theater where he filled in as an aircraft mechanic in a forward base. We had forward air bases so that planes did not have to fly from England. We had bases in France. Just one of the men that fought. This is Ralph Brandt from The Fireside.